Hello? Welcome, everyone, and happy Earth Week. We're so happy you're here to celebrate with us and to listen to a wonderful speaker, Aaron Redman, who will be speaking about renewables. And Bob will tell you more about all that. But first, a couple things. I asked Paul Peterson, and thank you, Paul, up there for your tech support. I asked him to put this slide up from the recent Artemis II trip around the moon and back. And I'm going to read just a few statements that the astronauts made that I thought were quite inspiring and moving. This is Christina Cook looking out from the space capsule at Earth. And it's a once in a there's so few people who ever get that experience to look at the full blue ball of, in the solar system and realizing that that's our home. And it moved all of them. And it moved us who were watching on television or listening to the radio. And this, I'll just read a little bit. As they looked down on their home planet from great distances, the astronauts got the unique opportunity to experience what has been dubbed the overview effect, a phenomenon caused by seeing the Earth from space that can shift astronauts' perspectives on life itself. Space philosopher Frank White coined the phrase in 1987, and astronauts for decades have described a similar feeling, the realization that everyone back on Earth shares more in common than we realize. Borders and divisions aren't visible from space. Trust us, you look amazing, you look beautiful, Victor Glover said on April 2nd. And from up here, you also look like one thing. Homo sapiens, all of us, no matter where you're from or what you look like, we're all one people. Victor Glover also said on another day, I would like to remind you of one of the most important mysteries on Earth, and that's love. Christina Cook had a profound message once they reconnected with Earth. We will explore, we will build ships, we will visit again, we will construct science outposts, we will drive rovers, we will do radio astronomy, we will found companies, we will bolster industry, we will inspire, but ultimately, we will always choose Earth. We will always choose each other. Victor Glover said when he got back, it's the whole experience, it's too big to be in just one body. It was too big to hold. And Reed Wiseman, before you launch, it feels like it's the greatest dream on Earth. And when you're out there, you just want to get back to your families and your friends. It's a special thing to be a human, and it's a special thing to be on planet Earth. And lastly, Christina Koch said, what struck me wasn't necessarily just Earth. It was all the blackness around it. Earth was just this lifeboat hanging on in the universe. So the question is, will we take care of this Earth, care for it as we need to do? And I believe Aaron, Bob, you want to introduce Aaron? And okay.
That was Susan Zock, who is the chair of the Environmental Justice Subcommittee in this parish, subcommittee of the Social Justice Committee. I'm Bob Walensky, a member of both the Environmental Justice Subcommittee and the Social Justice Committee. And I'd like to welcome you to this Earth Week presentation by Dr. Aaron Redman, who I will introduce in just a moment. Yes, this is Earth Week, and tomorrow is Earth Day, a national quote-unquote holiday created on April 22nd, 1970, in large part through the efforts of the great late U.S. Senator from and Governor of Gaylord Nelson, of Wisconsin, Gaylord Nelson, who was born in Clear Lake, Wisconsin. Nelson was way early on concerned for the environment, back in the 60s. During one congressional debate on air pollution and emissions, which from automobiles, which was part of the Clean Air Act discussion in Congress, he proposed eliminating all internal combustion engines in favor of steam and electric automobiles. This is in 1970. The bill was defeated, of course, in large part due to lobbying by the automobile manufacturers, but it was too early. The Gaylord Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies at UW-Madison is named in his honor. Of course, as Catholics, we're here for more than Earth Week and Gaylord Nelson, for we know of the late Pope Francis's charge in Laudato Si', his encyclical, of the need to preserve and maintain God's creation. Catholics have a moral obligation to protect the environment. And we are called to do so not only because this is God's creation, says Francis, but because the ongoing environmental crisis will have and is having its greatest impact on the poor, the weak, and the vulnerable, especially in the southern hemisphere. We are having and we're going to have a lot of climate migrants out of the south into the north as this trend continues. So, Pope Francis saw the current climate situation as a physical issue and also as a social, economic, and justice issue. We can return to this topic, if you like, in the question and answer session at the end. But for now, let me say that Aaron Redman, our speaker tonight, is an internationally known scholar and environmentalist who has spoken and consulted all over this country, Canada, Europe, Asia, South America, the world. Aaron's a native of Arizona and received his doctorate from Arizona State University in environmental sustainability. He is a global affiliate scholar at UWSP, I'm happy to say. As you know, this university has long had an interest in the environment. He held a postdoctoral position at Aalborg University in Denmark. He was brought into the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico to establish that institution's sustainability program. He has conducted research in Germany and contracted for consultation with UN agencies, universities, and private companies. He graduated high school from the Brophy Preparatory School in Arizona, and in 2024, he received that institution's St. Francis Xavier Award for Ignatian Identity, based again on his work on sustainability. So, while he's not a Catholic, he knows something about the Catholic tradition, albeit from a Jesuit perspective. Just kidding, just kidding. Aaron's talk this evening is titled Environmental Sustainability, Renewable Energy, and the Future. We'll ask you to hold your questions till the end, where we will turn the mic over to Aaron, and I'm sure he's happy to entertain all your questions. And we have refreshments in the lobby so we can continue the discussion. So I give you Aaron Redman.
Great, thank you very much.
Let me add one little caveat. The reason we have Aaron, in part, is because he is a resident of Stevens Point. He decided to live here, and we're so happy he has, and the university's happy he has, and Holy Spirit Parish is too, so thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Great. Can everybody hear me well? Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, it is actually, I didn't, it has been a little while since I was in high school, but actually I will say that of relevance to there, I do actually credit my time there with the track it put me on in life and the orientation towards service and towards community and the importance. It was an all-boys school, and the motto was men for others, and that really resonated with me a lot, and is something that I've continued to carry through, I hope, throughout my life. So I've got a few slides here as well, and I hope you'll forgive a lot of graphs, but I feel like they tell a very strong story here, and it's a story that I hope is a positive one. Now, I promise we didn't coordinate about the pictures, but we had the similar thought, I guess. Here's the Earthrise from the same mission that was just happening, obviously on our minds these days. We already heard a little bit about me, but I did want to talk about two projects that I'm working on in particular that have really gotten me particularly interested particularly in the climate change and the energy space. One of these projects, as Bob mentioned, out of university in Canada, we've been looking at climate change education globally and how countries around the world are or are not integrating climate change into their education systems, into all across all different types of areas, and how we can do more to bring awareness around climate change. So that's been a really exciting project, and to sort of be embedded in the international system there. The next thing is I've also, since 2021, been involved in a project that we call 10 New Insights in Climate Science. And this is a project where each year we get together and pick out 10 developments in climate science that we think are interesting or important, and put together an academic article and a report with the idea of really trying to provide that information for the annual climate conference and the decision makers who are making decisions around climate change and things like that. And so that's provided for me personally a lot of insight into the processes and updates and some of the information that's happening that I'll share today has come out of work that I've done as part of this project. So there's a lot of different things happening, and one exciting thing is that I can live in Stevens Point and still be involved in all these projects and things virtually. It is for, as much as it can be tedious to be on Zoom and the computer all day, it certainly provides a lot of exciting advantages. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be frustrated and sad about the state of the world. But there is actually, I think, a really strong case for optimism, perhaps informed optimism. And so that's what I want to focus on today. So it's not to say that there aren't plenty of concerning things, and we'll touch a little bit on that, but I wanted to focus, really talking about some things to be really excited about. And so hopefully that'll come across in some of the things that we're talking about. Basically, the first thing is that if you've been paying attention to climate change for very long, or the type of situation we're in, you might have heard projections. This is in Celsius, unfortunately, but that we might be facing 10 or more degrees warming Fahrenheit, so that's 5 degrees Celsius. But now it seems like we're almost surely not going to hit those worst case scenarios. So if you're hearing worst case scenario type of things that were common 10, 15 years ago, really those scenarios are highly unlikely. You can see basically that's what, let's see if I can do this projector. So this was what they were thinking the worst case was before. This is now much more likely what we're likely to be hitting here, which is still very bad. 3 degrees Celsius is close to 6 degrees Fahrenheit. We're already here at about 1.4 degrees centigrade of warming. And I don't know if you're paying much attention, but likely this next year is going to be very, very hot. We're in for, it seems like, a very strong El Nino, possibly the strongest in over 100 years, combined with already the average warming being higher. So we're likely to be much, much over that in the next year. But that's just part of those sort of fluctuations that will happen. Anyway, but the good thing is that we've avoided the worst that we were fearing, that people were fearing, that we were on track for 10, 15 years ago. And so what we're going to start by talking about is why. What happened? How have we avoided that? And that's really the core of the good news that we have. So the big thing, here's another thing that you may not hear very much, which is that when we look at the amount of emissions, the amount that we're putting of the things that cause global warming, the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide principally, but also methane and these other things, the amount that we're putting in the air for most countries around the world has fallen off quite steeply. And actually the most dramatic one here is the United Kingdom. This is the United Kingdom. Right now the United Kingdom is emitting about the same amount per person as they were in the early parts of the Industrial Revolution. So this is 1830. So basically before they had really, already really gotten started, and they're on a very, very steep decline. But it's not just the United Kingdom. I know, certainly the United States is not a leader in this way, but actually the emissions in the United States have dropped something like 20 or 30% per person in the last 15 or 20 years. And that's true for pretty much everywhere in the developed world, all across Europe. And in fact, probably for this year, this will be the first year that Chinese emissions haven't grown, and they're likely to start falling off quite steeply after this, as well as a whole variety of other countries around the world. So things have really already sort of turned the corner here in a way that, that we maybe weren't looking out for even 10, 15 years ago. And so that's the first thing. And that's the core of why things have gotten better. Is this echoing too much, or? All right. Is this better? Okay, sounds good. I don't need this. Okay, great. All right, so the big thing that's changed, here's the big thing that's happened, which is that we've had a complete revolution in renewable energy. And that's what this graph is showing, this is the last year. And one of the things about doing presentations like this is that the things are changing so fast that you have to almost continually update it. This report here came out yesterday. I also using some stuff from a report that came out today. So this is from the International Energy Agency, which is sort of the premier international organization that keeps track of energy use globally. And so what you can see here, and what they announced is that, that now solar has the most of any type of electricity producing technology. It has the most installed capacity in the world just because of the last year. That's this light blue bar on the bottom here. So the light blue bar is solar. You can see that, how little it was even just, we're looking at 10 years ago here. And this is last year. So many times, this is just the amount that was installed in 1 year. This isn't like the total amount. So this is just the amount that was installed in 1 year. So just, huge exponential growth in the installation of all renewables, but in particular solar. So the real story, when you hear the things about what's changing, the real thing that's changed is solar. We have wind and some other things here. This other renewables is like biomass and a couple other things, but mostly here, the story of renewable energy, and the big thing that's changed is solar panels. And it's not just, in the hippy-dippy places, so I don't know if you can see which states we have here, but this is California here, and actually the state right now that's producing the most solar generation from utilities is Texas. So not a state you particularly think of as being friendly to renewable energy, and in fact, the fossil fuel industry there last year tried to pass some legislation where basically like every time you installed a solar plant, you had to build a natural gas plant too, just because, and then it was actually defeated by a bunch of the Republican lawmakers whose constituents, and especially in West Texas, are like, this is like our huge lifeline for us to put in the solar plants and to put in wind, and wanted nothing to do with this idea, so it was actually defeated. California actually does produce more solar energy than Texas. This isn't including rooftop solar, and California has a lot of rooftop solar, whereas in Texas it's pretty much all. When we say utility, that means like, the 100 acres of panels that are run generally by your standard utilities or other companies. But as you can see, the growth rate in Texas is just continuing, and it's likely to continue. They're one of the renewable powerhouses in the entire world, as well as in the United States. And we can see the results of that. So, all this installed solar capacity, what is happening? So they just a few weeks ago in March, this was the first month, that's what, that was the wrong button, sorry. This is right here. It's hard to see the text here. So this is right here showing with the green line is that renewables for the first time produced more electricity than natural gas in the United States in the month of March. So that's what that's showing. You see these like seasonal fluctuations, and we'll get back to that in a minute, but this is an ongoing challenge, right? This is, more solar during the day and less at night, and we'll get back to that issue in a minute. That's not just here. As I mentioned, this is happening in countries all over the world. Here's Chile, which had basically no solar energy, and now it produces far more. This is wind plus solar, and this is all their fossil fuels, and now they produce quite a bit more from wind plus solar than they do from fossil fuels. So this is a story that you see all over the world. This is one of the graphs I mentioned I picked up this morning from a report that just came out about last year, and they are pointing out now that renewables, which is again solar plus wind plus, in this case they're also adding in, I think they're adding in hydro here too, which is a bit of a debate about whether you do that or not, but anyways, produced more non-carbon electricity than any other source, including coal, which was previously globally the most commonly used fuel for producing electricity. So, I mean, you can see these big changes that are happening around the world. Another piece of the story that is a big part of the climate change story is electric cars. Not something maybe that we see around here too much, but we see the same graph like we saw with solar, right? So this is sales per year of electric cars. And in fact, last year, the reports that I mentioned that just came out, over a quarter of cars sold globally were electric or hybrid. And most of those were fully electric. About, I think, a quarter or so of those are hybrid cars. But this is going from basically nothing 10 years ago. So we're going from almost no cars sold globally that were electric to over a quarter of them. In some countries, as we'll see later, like Norway, I think Norway sold something like 3 cars that weren't electric in January and February or something. It's basically nothing. And there's some surprising countries in there as well. I won't get too much into this, but a huge part of this whole story is China. That's this orange bar here. So this is where a huge portion of the electric cars are being both produced and sold. But this graph over here, which again, you can't see the text on this slide, all these green lines are other countries that you wouldn't necessarily expect here. So we have like here, this is Uruguay. We have up here is Singapore. And then there's Vietnam on this list and a couple other ones. So a lot of countries that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And I'm going to come back to why I really feel, why this part really excites me, is that this isn't just some like rich person's trend. This is a global trend, and it's going to be making a lot of people's lives a lot better. This really fun graph. I knew you guys would be excited about the graphs, and this one's really fun. This is one of my favorite graphs, actually. So this graph here, you can see this huge yellow thing here, right? So this is how electricity was produced in California on March 29th, so a little bit less than a month ago. And so we have this big yellow thing. This is all electricity generated and this is time. So this is like midnight. We're going through the day. The sun comes up, and California starts producing all this electricity from solar, right? So just all of this here from solar power, the sun goes down, and they have to get electricity from other places, right? And this problem here has been known about for a long time, and they actually have this fun name for it. It's called a duck curve. It's because if you draw the graph here, it sort of looks like a duck a little bit. And so this was something that people were always like, solar's never going to work. You have this duck curve problem. You can only, basically, you can see it already. California already is almost maxed out. You can't build more solar panels than you're using electricity during the day, right? Because that's all that's there. But this is the key. So if this was the limit, then we'd be okay. We've basically sort of reached our limit, right? This is all we can do. And as long as we keep putting carbon into the atmosphere, as long as we keep burning fossil fuels, the temperature is going to keep going up. The only way we're going to stop it is, which I'll get back to, is to go to zero. So this is better, sure, but it still wouldn't be all the way. But the key part here, which of course no one can read the legend at the bottom, that's part of my trick here, is that this big purple thing here. And this big purple thing is batteries. So the big key that is unlocking all of this change is not just the price of solar panels, but it's also the price of batteries. So this purple here is like during all this day when we're producing tons of solar, they're also charging these huge grid-sized batteries. And then the sun goes down, and actually that's the time that most electricity is used. Everyone's coming home from work, they're turning their air conditioners back on, they're turning their heaters back on, they're cooking dinner, they're running the laundry machine, all this type of stuff. And so that's actually the peak energy use is like late in the day, which is a bit of a problem. The sun's going down, everyone's turning everything on. In the summer, it's the hottest time of the day. So it's a big challenge. So what's happening now is Texas and California in particular, in the United States at least, are building tons of batteries as a complement. So during this part of the day, electricity is super cheap. You fill up your batteries, these huge batteries during the day, and then you start discharging them. This purple part didn't exist only a couple years ago. This is all new capacity that's being built, and it's being built basically as fast as they can get the things built right now. And this another interesting thing actually that you can do here, just to go on a little bit of a side thing. This blue is hydropower, and so you can, don't have to release water from dams all day. You can wait. So one of the other advantages, right, with things like hydro is you can wait. You can also like pump water up into the dam during the day and then let it go during the night. So hydro is a nice complement actually to solar. And then we have some nuclear here on the bottom and stuff too. But the big problem with solar has been this idea that that we can only use it during the day, right? And it doesn't work the rest of the time. Batteries are changing that equation, and we come back to this in a year, and this purple thing is going to keep growing, and it's going to keep growing, and eventually it'll probably take over most of the space at night, if not all of it. And so you're able, through the combination of solar plus batteries, able to squeeze out most of all the fossil fuels, and that's what's happening in places like California, Texas, and other countries around the world. And this is a story similar to solar. What we have over here is the price of batteries. So this is like the price of batteries for a certain amount of electricity they can hold. And basically, just a steep fall off with no end of the price decline in sight. So it's just continuing to go down. And so as it's gotten cheaper, again, this is installations per year, not the total numbers. So just, huge rapid installations of batteries. And this obviously is part of the story also of why electric cars now are also changing as well. Is that the price, the biggest unit cost of an electric car is its battery. And the price of batteries has come so far down that's radically changed the equation for cars also as well. So these are the big stories that have happened that have really changed the equation radically and are causing, as I noted, for the first time, in human history, basically, that our carbon emissions have been falling on a per capita basis in most countries around the world, and will fall globally here, hopefully quite soon. That's another story for the end. But what does this have to do? Why am I telling this story? As we mentioned, as part of the Environmental Justice Committee, we're here to think a little bit about that, and it's something that for me, and this is actually for me why it gets me most excited, as well. And I think the first part of this story is hopefully a fairly obvious one to all of you, which has already been mentioned, is that when we think about the impacts of climate change, these are going to fall most heavily on those that are most vulnerable. I'm just going to have two world maps here. This one was part of a paper that I worked on, but basically the red here is showing like places where it's getting people working is going to be impacted, like the extent. The redder it is, the more people are going to be impacted who work outside, agriculture, stuff like that. And we can see, obviously, the tropics, hotter part of the globe, are impacted worse. The other thing I want to bring our attention to here is there's two maps here. And this one here is 2 degrees Celsius warming, and this is 3 degrees Celsius warming. And a lot of the times you're going to hear messages that it's like, we crossed this threshold and now it's a disaster and everything underneath. There's no scientific basis for the idea that at one point now it's going to be terrible, and as long as we stay below that, it's fine. Basically, every little bit of warming is going to make it worse for many people, and it's going to increase the risk of really bad things happening. So there's no point in which it's not 3 degrees is bad, but 3.1 is worse, 3.2 is worse. So each little bit that we can do to keep it down, we're making lives better for people, we're reducing the risks, particularly for those that are most vulnerable. And that's what this graph here is showing. This is an estimate of how vulnerable people are to climate change. And what we see here when we look at these two graphs, particularly you can look at Australia, right? It's still red here, so it has sort of like a high risk in terms of labor, but it's a wealthy country. So it's not considered a particularly vulnerable country to climate change. And this is where, where we go when we think about that. And in fact, I think a local example for me, this really hits home, which is, it's going to get much warmer here in Wisconsin. That's what this graph is showing here, like an estimate of how many days over 90 degrees that we're having are going to increase here by the latter part of the century. My daughter's school does not have air conditioning. In May and September, she's right over there too if you want to look at her, but in May and September, how are the kids supposed to be in the classroom when it's over 90 outside? And there's 20 or 30 of them in one of these classrooms. I mean, you can feel that it's not good, but there's a ton of evidence also that hot classrooms seriously impede student learning, that students do worse on tests, and especially now, they're already in the midst of taking tests. They're going to take a bunch in May as well. Easily can be happening during 90+ degree days with no air conditioning. And so we can think about, that's just, a school here in a relatively well-off area. We can be sure that many schools all over the state, and particularly those, in less well-off neighborhoods, are going to lack the infrastructure. So a lot of when we think about the unequal impacts of climate change, it's generally speaking not that we can't. I mean, we have air conditioning, we have lots of technologies, fortunately, to be able to adapt to them. And so people are going to be able to live there. I grew up in Arizona, in Phoenix. It's never going to be as hot here as it was there. But there are no schools in Arizona that don't have air conditioning. So even if it's 5 degrees hotter in Arizona, your kids are going to be going to classrooms in an air-conditioned classroom, even if it's hotter and more miserable, which might be the case to be outside, but we have a different type of infrastructure. And that's even more so in so many countries around the world where there is really no air conditioning at all. Nobody has it. Maybe the wealthiest in those areas have it at all. And now are going to be moving from climates where you didn't really need it, it was probably okay, to climates now where things like that. So that's just sort of one aspect. There's lots of other things, the ways our infrastructure is built, but generally, if you have the resources, we are going to be able to largely adapt to it. It's the people that don't have the resources that are really going to suffer. And so that's the first justification of why we should care about this revolution that's happening in clean energy, is each degree of warming that we can reduce, we're already baked in. The world is going to be hotter for our children than it was for our parents and for our grandparents. It's going to be a hotter world. There is really nothing that we can do about that. We can hope that maybe my great-grandchildren, we can return the climate relatively to where it was before, but it's going to be hotter, and it's a question of how much hotter and so much how much worse it's going to be for billions of people around the world. But there's another aspect of this to me that really resonates with me, and to explain why that's the case, I wanted to share a little bit of an aside that gets into to my background. The first was actually my first college term paper. I went to Rice University in Houston. It was actually on climate change. I went and found it. I didn't want to make you guys read it. It's not very good. But I wrote this my first semester, my freshman year in college, about climate change. And at that point in 2001, it was, the science was relatively well established that this was happening. Actually, it's amazing. You go back to some of the predictions, warming predictions from the 90s and even the 80s, relatively close to what we're already experiencing. These models have really held up. But anyways, when we're looking at what can we do about climate change, we know it was happening. And basically at that point already, it was fairly clear, that we were gonna have to cut massively in the amount of electricity we're using. There weren't solutions. I mean, there were solar panels existed, but they were extremely expensive. Electric cars that, I don't know if you remember, but GM came out with that one little electric car that they killed around this time period. There wasn't an option, other options. You're only out, there weren't even hybrid cars yet at that time. So it was like, well, people are just gonna not have to be able to drive anywhere. We're gonna have to not use any electricity. These are the type of choices that you're contemplating that just existed at that time. That combined with then, I was in the Peace Corps then, and this is a kitchen in the village where I lived in the Peace Corps. And so they're using, fire here to cook their food. And you can see all the black there, and just imagine what the inside of their lungs is basically looking the same as the inside of the kitchen here. And so this is the life. This isn't a particularly, on the scope of the world, a particularly poor community necessarily. And in fact, most of the people here had electricity when I was there in 2005. So that wasn't that necessarily exactly. It was that there's not enough electricity, that it's expensive, that it's unreliable. But basically, when that experience combined with learning about this, we faced this impossible felt to me situation, which was that globally we needed to cut our fossil fuel use dramatically. At the same time, saying there were a lot of people that really didn't even have a light on at night, or had so little that they weren't not even close to meeting what we would consider sort of a bare minimal need. And so what were we saying here, sitting here in the more developed world? Oh, we got here to the stage we are by filling the air up with carbon dioxide, but you guys aren't allowed to do that. The rest of the world, you're not allowed to emit anything because we already did it and we've sort of broken the climate, and it's too bad for the rest of you guys. That's kind of where it is. And there was in some ways sort of not a way out of that. This graph is not very informative, so I don't really want to talk about it. We'll stick on this one. But the point here was that we were in this like impossible trade-off. And so to me, the really exciting thing about this thing is that it's in some ways gotten us out of that. In that the availability of energy that is both clean and cheap, which did not exist up until a few years ago, creates the potential that we don't have to make this trade-off, that we don't have to say the choices are either that a whole bunch of people in the world have to stay poor, have to stay without the sort of bare minimal necessities. Energy is at the foundation of almost everything that we take for granted in our life, from everything that we're producing to our day-to-day needs in ways that it's really hard to imagine living without. So we were saying, or the world was just going to warm enormously. We were going to, face sort of really unpredictable consequences. And that was sort of the choice that we've been facing for the last 30 years as we understood what we were doing to the climate. And we had, at last, for me, I feel like, for the first time, I feel like this isn't such a trade-off, this isn't such a choice or conundrum that we face the whole time. And just to illustrate that, we're going to get back to some more graphs. This is Pakistan, not a country you'd think of necessarily as a solar power superhouse, but you can see this graph here. This is Pakistan here in terms of their solar power generation. Something like a quarter of energy now in Pakistan is coming from solar panels. Basically, the people there, they have tariff-free importation from China. It's relatively close to China, actually, and so they people there just got tired of not having electricity, unreliability, and they just started buying solar panels in mass as an individual level. The utilities also started switching to solar. So it's been this kind of totally unexpected story of a sort of massive revolution. This is countries in sub-Saharan Africa and their solar power importations here. And so basically we're seeing countries with extremely low penetration of electricity, realizing the opportunity here that solar presents. And so to me, these type of graphs are extremely hopeful in that this isn't just like what we need to do in terms of replacing what we have here, the use of fossil fuels and these kind of polluting technologies with this new technology, but actually presenting the opportunity for the first time for so many people to be able to meet what we would consider really bare needs, and to be able to live such better lives. And that to me is really exciting, that it both is possible and can be done in a way that's supportive. And this isn't just happening with solar panels, it's happening with cars too. This right here, so here's Norway, as I mentioned. This to the right, this graph might not make a lot of sense. This is 100% of your vehicle sales are electric over here. So Norway is like almost 100% here. The second country that last year bought the most electric vehicles as a percentage of car sales is Nepal. That's what this country is right here, is Nepal. And then there's a bunch of European countries in light blue, but we also have Hong Kong and Singapore. There's Vietnam, and then there's a couple other countries in here. But anyways, really, a bunch of countries, that's what this graph is also showing here. Again, a bunch of countries that you wouldn't expect are looking at electric vehicles and seeing this as an option. And so I think the aspiration that we have here is that all these places where people haven't had access to all the modern conveniences that we've had modern necessities that we take for granted, now have the opportunity to have those as part of their lives and to lead much improved lives around the world. So just to close out, I just want to do just a little bit of negativity, I guess, or just why we need to act on it. It's not just happening. Here's when I wrote that term paper. This is the amount of Emissions, amount of greenhouse gases, climate change creating gases that we're putting into the atmosphere every year. That's a gigaton, GT. This is where we were emitting per year when I wrote that paper back in 2001. So we have not quite doubled the amount per year in the intervening time. So obviously progress, it doesn't look like we've made a lot of progress, other than either there was a financial meltdown or a global pandemic. But other than that, we haven't made much progress. But the expectation is that this year, probably this year in 26, will be the first year that it hasn't grown. So that's something. Unfortunately, what we actually have to do is go to zero. This is what this arrow is. This is actually what the graphs need to look like. They need to go down like this. This is a non-trivial challenge, and we can get into all the other things besides cars and solar panels that we need. But cars and solar panels are half of this or so. So we have a huge challenge in front of us. This isn't something that it's like, okay, we've got cheap electric cars and cheap solar panels, job done. We have a huge task in front of us. As I said before, each bit of this emissions that goes in the air, that means the planet's going to be a little bit warmer, And so every bit that this, stays flat, as long as this stays flat, that's nice. It's better that it's flat than it's going up. But that still means that it's getting hotter, until we bring it down to zero. When we bring it down to zero, then it'll stop getting hotter. It's not going to get cooler, but it'll stop getting hotter. And so until we can get it to zero, the world is not going to stop getting hotter every year. As they say, that's sort of this year is the coolest year that you will ever experience going forward. So I went back to El Salvador in March, actually, and here we are. And the technology for cooking has not changed very much, as you can see here. So still cooking with fire for a lot of the things that you need. And as I mentioned, this isn't just a story about access to electricity. It's about the availability of enough electricity in a reliable way. And so, it's not just that we need to change. Like I said, we're going to need to produce, if we really want people to live well, everyone to live well, we need a lot more electricity, and we need it everywhere in the world. And that includes, we're likely going to need a lot more here as well. This is, we can get into this story as well, but this is the United States. They're expecting electricity has been flat. Demand for that has been flat over the last 15 years. It's expected to start growing dramatically and is growing already. And so it's not just that we need to switch over to solar. And so the point of that, and why I bring that up, is that a lot of the environmental movement has been about stopping bad things, right? Like we've been, since the 60s and the 70s and even earlier, it was about, stopping industrial plants from dumping their waste in rivers. It was about stopping air pollution and reducing the amount of things they were doing. When it comes to climate change, that's not going to be enough. We can't just stop. There is no stopping it. It is embedded. It's the creation of a warmer and warmer planet is how our society is built. And if we want, and is how the good, almost what all of us would consider a good life, is constructed on. And if we want that for everybody else, the opportunity, the option for everybody else in the world to choose a life, and to choose a life that brings them personal satisfaction, a life that's healthy, we need a lot more energy. And so we can't just stop bad things, we have to actually build these good things. And so, but what's exciting is that we didn't even have that option to build those things 20, 30 years ago, or even 10 years ago. And we now have the opportunity to actually build these good things that we need, but we have to actually think with that mentality. And that is going to be a big challenge, is that we have to think about how can we get this out? Because remember, each carbon atom that we put in the atmosphere, that's going to be up there for 100 years and going to be warming the planet that whole time. So every one that we can keep out and not waiting around. You can think about the especially your big choices. We can think about the bigger area is policy. I also want to flag, I think we're going to be doing, as I said, the world is going to be warmer. There's going to be a lot of changes to that. And I think it's incumbent on us that sit in a more privileged position to think about how we can adapt in a just way. So, when things are warmer, when we're having, higher frequency rain events in Wisconsin, thinking about which are the communities that haven't been able to adapt to that sure, maybe you built the infrastructure in the 50s and 60s and that was fine for the climate then, but we're living in a different climate. And I think we need to be thinking about how to do that in a just way. Just to close out, a lot of people are like, well, how the scale of this? We're going to have to cover the entire planet. This right here represents how much of the corn we use for ethanol, which is a crazy amount. It's something like 30% of our corn crop goes to ethanol. If we covered this small corner of that corn crop with solar panels, we would produce as much energy as is produced by this whole huge area of ethanol. So we're doing lots of things, extremely inefficiently. One of those is growing corn for fuel. And this isn't even counting, obviously, growing corn for feed, which is the other main reason we grow corn. So this is just corn for ethanol. And so just, converting a tiny bit of that, and we're producing already as much electricity as we get from all of the ethanol production. So just as a relative comparison there. So I think that was all I have to say. So thank you very much. Appreciate you guys coming here.
Thank you very much, Aaron. I should add that today is Aaron's birthday. Before we get to the Q&A, yeah, it is his birthday. So you just missed Earth Day, Aaron. And it's you're born in Earth Week. I mean, that's still rather significant. And I think my wife Molly has a little something over there coming for Aaron. I should also add that in his spare time, Aaron dates my daughter and her daughter too. Yeah. Okay. So, in any case, Molly's working on it. So we want to wish you a very happy birthday, Aaron. And here's some reminder from Holy Spirit Parish that it's your happy birthday. Okay, we will entertain questions. Now, I think maybe you better go back to this, Aaron, because I will walk around with this mic so that we can all hear the questions, and especially those watching this live on stream. And this will be recorded, so you can watch it again if you are so inclined. So, questions from the floor. Professor Paul Soroka.
My frustration is that so many people that I think many of us encounter are seemingly intelligent, and yet for some reason they feel they understand weather better than the scientists, and that there's been an ice age, and all these things are not related to man and his performance in the world. And to convince people to move towards solutions is such a painful thing, and the United States is not leading. But I do want to just mention that David Pogue, the science editor of sorts for CBS News, had beautiful pieces on CBS Sunday Morning. And the one that I wanted to highlight is that their statement was that the making of concrete produces more CO2 than all the cars in the world and all the ships at sea. I'm not sure if he included air traffic. But we produce, I think he said, more than 10 times Hoover Dam every day in the world, and yet now scientists, with creativity, have in the University of North Carolina and a branch in Denmark are basically making cement without the use of any carbon demanding things. They're basically making it in the same way that coral would be made, and using microbes. And I bring it mainly if it opens a thought on your part, but to suggest that if people will accept the problem, the solutions mankind have always that innovative skill set.
Yeah, I think, that cement is one of the very hard to deal with areas, in part because it's not just the energy, but the actual process of making cement releases carbon into the air itself. Yeah, exactly. So the green cement thing is a huge, one of these huge areas, which also points to me like when there are areas that we have figured out, we need to move on them because agriculture, cement making, airplane travel, these are going to be some really hard ones to solve. and so we want to move where we can while we can. So yeah, no, that's a really exciting one, and I think it just points also to I was just actually speaking of flying and emissions. I was in Hawaii, which is this incredibly isolated place. If you don't, it's so far from anywhere, and yet humans with nothing more than these were sophisticated navigators, but they navigated the largest ocean in the world. With dugout canoes and stone tools. It's really incredible. And so, we are, as humans, really capable of incredible things when we work together towards common goals. And so hopefully we can get people excited about these common goals of, developing the technologies and ways of working that are going to protect our climate.
Currently, there's no subsidies for electric vehicles or tax credits for solar panels. Are there subsidies for ethanol plants, for corn ethanol plants?
Yeah, that's the reason that we produce ethanol is there's a variety of mechanisms. We guarantee a price floor. A huge amount of your tax dollars is going to growing fuel out of corn, because we do all kinds of mechanisms on ethanol. And I think actually this is one of the stories here. Number one, at least on the solar front, it's gotten so cheap that really the subsidies aren't, the pull out of subsidies with the repeal of the IRA, with our favorite bill from last year, isn't impacting stuff so much as you might have expected. It is impacting the electric car thing. I did not on purpose show how electric vehicle sales fell off quite substantially last year here in the United States specifically. But what we're seeing here is really, the United States is going to be left behind. The rest of the world is not sitting there saying, oh, we're going to bar the import of these frankly superior vehicles. The US auto manufacturers are going to quickly find that there's almost no countries interested in buying their vehicles anymore. And so, we're really sort of, unsurprisingly, putting ourselves in a competitively bad situation if you care about that angle. But unfortunately, pulling things back. I think the good thing, luckily, is that, as I said, I think a lot of these sort of clean energy technologies, at least, just make more sense, even without the subsidies. Obviously, it would be better to accelerate them faster, but they're at least making that sense. And I think at some point, the car thing, we're going to have to wake up to that as a society, because we are already being left behind by almost all countries in the world.
Anybody else? Please.
I was just saying, so those are some little tips for us, like things we can do for the environment, like carry our own water bottles.
Yeah, I mean,
solar lights, succulents.
That was just a fun little graphic.
No,
that I used.
it's good. It's like good things to think about.
I do want to emphasize. I think I have my reusable water bottle, and I do that. But really, when we talk about sort of big impacts that we can have, it's basically the three areas where you have the most impact on your choices are, how you get around, your living situation, both in terms of the impact that has on how much you have to drive, and also sort of the heating, cooling, construction, those type of things, and then the food that you consume, right? Like, meat-heavier diets have more emissions. All that corn that's not being used for ethanol is largely feeding animals. And some things like that. So there are those big things. And then the other thing, which I think is often, because I think we put a lot of onus on sort of the individual responsibility. Oh, you need to make all these decisions, and there's this long list. And the reality is that most of the things on this long list are not, especially when we're talking about climate change, are having little to no impact. Some of them are probably a neutral impact, and they may be better for other reasons. It may be, for example, we're keeping plastic bags out of the environment, and they're blowing, and animals are eating them. The carbon benefits of using a reusable bag over a plastic bag are much more debatable. It depends on how many times you reuse the reusable bag. They're a lot more energy intensive to produce. They weigh more to ship. So there's a lot of decisions like that. And so from my perspective, really thinking about what are the big ones that are really producing it. And most of our emissions come from those three areas as an individual. But the big thing we can do is think about where we can, change policy, things like that we can support. Thinking about, projects and other things maybe that are going up that would be helpful in your neighborhood. Maybe not even stuff you're doing, but there could be, projects that are supporting better transit or denser housing. There could be projects that are working on installing clean energy. There could be state level policies, supporting these type of things. These are all the types of things I think that, really on the scale of what we need are the types of differences that we can make. Yeah.
So it turns out that central Wisconsin's pretty good for solar, mostly because we have large amounts of inexpensive land.
Right.
And so we have the large development that's been approved down just south of Plover there. My interest as a wildlife biologist is like what the compatibility of that land with other things. When you grow corn on a big area, you're going to get corn. If you put a bunch of solar panels on an area and you can plant under the solar panels, but do you know much about like what's compatible with solar on the landscape?
Yeah, no, I think this is a really important question, and it would be, speaking about like what are other things that we can do, right? Like trying a lot of innovations around this space. So, I read these sort of small stories about, here's this farm doing this, or, this country is doing this thing or whatever, and, how much of this is done at the scale of what we need, right? Like, hundreds of millions of panels, is this being done at the scale that matters? And I think that's a really good question. And I think it's, all this, there is a balancing, right? And I think, sometimes I might have a tendency to be like, people are complaining because they don't like the look of it, or there's these like aesthetic concerns, and that, bothers me. But at the same time, I do think we need to balance those things. And there will be trade-offs, right? And so if we can figure out how to do it, jointly, and I think the thing about it though is we just have to be, it's a little bit risky, and I think the downside is like it's going to be a lot worse if it keeps getting hotter, and that's the trade-off. It's not, it's going to stay like it is now. Staying like it is now is not one of the choices that we're making, right? The choices that we're making are, to build this clean energy economy, and there will be trade-offs with that, and I don't want to trivialize those, and the most we can minimize those, the better, and maybe even find mutually beneficial things, shading parking lots with solar panels, things like that. In France, you now have to, all new parking lots that are constructed have to be constructed with solar shades and stuff like that, right? Like, so, there's policies, speaking of policies, things you can do that are mutually beneficial, right? But there may be also ones that are just, have consequences, and we may have to weigh those. But the thing to remember is it's not as it is now. The trade-off with not building clean energy is a hotter world and the accompanying consequences, yeah.
Along those lines, there's a lot of controversy about data centers that are being built, which is going to increase the demand for electricity. Is there any attempt to try and require renewable energy rather than trying to up the fossil fuel industry?
This is what we have to do, right? Like, I think that there's, we have to, and another policy space action here is the opportunity, and I've seen some different proposals on this front, to require, if you're going to be able to build a data center, that you have to, purchase, equal amount of renewable energy, or you have to provide the grid upgrades necessary. The other thing, to get into the weeds, is part of our problem is that our electrical grid isn't built to handle solar. It's not built to handle the way it's distributed. We don't have the high voltage power lines that we need to move electricity around. So there's a whole variety of upgrades that aren't even just the panels themselves that we need. And I think that has to be the case. This needs to happen like ASAP, where, ideally it would happen at the federal level, but we know that's not happening. But like within our, at the state level, I think moratoriums and things like that are not going to do anything, and will likely fail. But this is the industry right now that has huge amounts of capital, and we can put that capital to really good use and build ourselves, a better future grid with that. So hopefully that's happening. I've heard a lot of proposals. I haven't heard like them being made into policy, and so I guess we'll see if that happens.
There's a huge current in the Atlantic Ocean, maybe there's one in the Pacific too,
Yeah.
which brings cold seawater down to the south and warm water up to the north. And there's been recent articles about this weakening faster than what they thought it would weaken based upon climate change. Are you aware of any studies as to how serious a problem this is? Is this something we should be worried about a little bit more than we have been? Because what I hear is the result of this will be colder climates in the north, warmer climates in the south, even the return, some people have speculated, of glaciers and things of that nature because the ocean's not circulating, and so the air doesn't circulate.
Yeah, I know the AMOC, as it's called, there's been a couple recent studies that it's a lot of guesswork, right? Like we don't know. And there's signs, it's one of those really, if you ask a climate scientist, they often will have very strong opinions one way or the other about how much we should be worried about the AMOC in particular. And it's a critical ocean current for the warmth in Europe in particular. So Europe is, if you ever look at one of those maps where they put the European cities on North America and they're all like way up in Canada, that's because, the only reason you can go to Ireland and it's not miserably cold is because they get this warm current that brings up the warm water from the Caribbean. And so the point is that for a variety of mechanisms, it may stop moving, and if it stops moving, Europe will get much, much colder. And so there is a risk. This is something that there's been a lot of talk about, sort of tipping points. Another one is the Amazon drying out. So there's some concern that the Amazon might dry out, which would have pretty catastrophic weather disruptive experiences. I mean, I think what a lot of these point to too, right, is that these things would be very disruptive. They'd be radical changes. If we came onto an Earth where Europe was colder than it is now, that would just be a different Earth, right? But this is happening over timescales where we haven't built our infrastructure, we haven't built our cities, we haven't built our ways of living around how the planet could change over the scale of years or decades. And so I think it is a real threat. I think we should take that seriously. And it seems, part of the thing with this temperature increases is like the easiest impact is saying it's just hotter, and that makes life worse. And there's things like insects can move further north, and there's trouble growing crops, and there's all kinds of direct impacts. More precipitation because it's hotter, it rains more, things like that. But there's a lot of unpredictable impacts. And so we have to be thinking each degree we're getting warmer, it doesn't mean that, we crossed this threshold, now the AMOC's gonna shut down. But each degree we're getting warmer, all these risks of these really big changes, Greenlandic ice sheet melting is another big one that people worry about, that would raise the sea level something like 10 to 20 feet. Things like this, we're increasing the odds. So, I think it is another reason to, want to reduce emissions and things like that. I hope you don't lose sleep over it. There's not too much we can do if it's gonna shut down.
I'll reserve the last question for myself, if you don't mind, because it's time to go. This is the land of free enterprise.
Yes.
This is the land of capitalism, the land of the market. Do you think that the market will be a hindrance to this great change towards solar and wind and hydro and alternatives? Or do you think it'll be a great drag on it?
Historically, it's definitely been a drag, right? In terms of, what being chosen. I think we're sort of fortunately maybe in the sweet spot where it's like actually a big advantage. And I think it will be for a while, where, that just makes market sense. And in fact, when we talk about the data centers and they want to bring power to grid really fast, it's actually much faster to deploy a bunch of solar panels than it is for them to build a gas-powered power plant. Now they're worried about supply disruptions, things like that. So there's a lot of sort of market-based advantages to a lot of these clean technologies. But it's probably not enough, right? We're gonna add on this clean energy, but that is gonna make, the demand for oil and gas and these things are gonna fall, so those are gonna get cheaper, and so people are gonna continue to use them because they're gonna get cheaper again when people are using less of them. And so to some amount, number one, we're gonna have to, via policy, decide as a society, hopefully, that we're gonna phase these things out completely, right? That we're gonna stop using them. We did that with CFCs, as part of the Montreal Protocol. We don't worry about the hole in the ozone layer anymore because we actually, phase those chemicals out completely. And we don't use them anymore across the entire world, largely because the chemical companies found some replacements and were like, yeah, sure, that's okay. We can sell these new ones. and they work just as well. They're climate chemicals, which is a different problem, but it is possible, right? Like there is stories and we can do that, but it will take more than the market ultimately. And even worse than that, if we want to return to some sort of more stable climate, we're going to have to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. And that's going to be very expensive. And that's not going to be driven by the market. There's no market for taking carbon out of the atmosphere. We as a society are going to have to decide that we want to pay to pull carbon out of the atmosphere at some point. It's very expensive still to do, but at some point, hopefully we are going to do that. But yeah.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Can we give Aaron a... Again, you can rewatch this at the parish website. And thanks to Paul, our technician. And thank you all for coming. Please join us out there for more conversation and some goodies. Good night.